What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. It is Thursday, April 25th, 2024, and I have some breaking news to share with you guys. Right now, it is 14:47 Eastern Time here in the United States, and we currently have U.S. nuclear forces still on high alert. What you're looking at here are 3 nuclear war command and control planes up in the air right now this afternoon over the continuous United States. And we also have a presidential doomsday plane that was looping over the upper peninsula of Michigan. And we also have a B 52 nuclear bomber airborne over the central plains. So let me just show you guys these nuclear war command and control planes. So we have one flying near Las Vegas right now. We have one looping over the Ozarks. We have one heading out to the Gulf of Mexico. Here we have the B 52 flying over Kansas. Here we have the presidential doomsday plane that was looping over the upper peninsula of Michigan this morning and this afternoon. Now, we also have some unusual activity off of the Delmarva Peninsula again today. Over the last couple of days, we've seen a lot of sub hunter and reconnaissance plane activity here off the coast of Assateague Island and Delaware. And today we have 2 E-2 Hawkeyes. These are U.S. Navy AWACS planes flying in the same area they were just 2 days ago. And then here we have another MQ-4C Triton flying parallel to the Maryland and Delaware coast. This is extremely concerning, guys. There could be some kind of Russian reconnaissance sub or even attack sub or potentially even nuclear armed sub in this area. You can see these Hawkeyes are actually flying right off the continental shelf where the water drops to thousands of feet deep. But I want to remind you guys that Russia, China, and a lot of other countries, they have these mini subs that are literally like 6 feet long, and they can be used in very shallow waters. They could even send one of those up the Potomac right up to the tidal pool in downtown DC, and they can use that to gather various types of information. They can also use those mini subs to cut cables. That's how Russia cut undersea cables in Europe. They have these tiny autonomous submarines. Okay, they're like underwater drones, and they have these little arms with giant scissors on them. Okay, like hydraulic scissors they can use to cut cables. So these could be out here, guys. Okay, so I wanted to just start off with that. Also, I want to mention to you guys an update on Culinary Night, which was last week, the night where we had all those emergency action messages being broadcasted nonstop. And we were brought up to a ready to launch status. Our nuclear forces were brought up to the highest level. Basically, the missiles were armed and ready to launch, and we were covering it here live. Well, we have some famous people that have been shouting me out, and I want to just say thanks to Steve Quayle for backing me up on that whole situation. There's been a lot of people trying to discredit me, saying that that was just an exercise. Guys, they don't do exercises on the main nuclear war frequencies. Okay, we were listening to this on 11175, which is the main nuclear war frequency used by U.S. nuclear forces. That would be the same thing as your local 911 doing a training exercise with your local police and fire departments on 911 to test their radios. You don't do that because if there's an actual emergency, guess what? People can't use 911. Okay, same thing with our nuclear forces. If there's an actual emergency and we actually have to use those frequencies to tell our nuclear forces to launch within 5 to 10 minutes, if they're in the middle of doing an exercise on those frequencies, that's going to mess things up, isn't it? Okay, but I actually have a clip from the Hagman Report with Steve Quayle. And Steve Quayle reached out to an expert on emergency action messages, and his expert basically confirmed everything I was saying. And so I have an audio clip from last week of Steve Quayle on the Hagman Report that I'm going to share with you guys at the end of the video, of Steve Quayle backing me up, shouting me out. So big thanks to Steve Quayle. Guys, Steve Quayle is a legend, okay? And it's really surreal to hear someone like him shouting me out. So big thanks to Steve Quayle. Also, Mike from around the world backed me up as well. Mike from around the world, he's a contributor on the Paul Begley channel. Okay, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of Paul Begley. Mike from around the world is one of his geopolitical experts that he always brings on to talk about world events. Well, he backed me up as well. I have an audio clip of that too. Also, I want to give a big thanks to Watchwoman65. She's been shouting me out a lot lately. Thank you very much, Watchwoman65. I appreciate you. And I want to just share with you guys this audio clip of some type of encrypted radio teletype traffic on the main U.S. nuclear war frequency last night. This was blaring on this frequency all night long and into this morning. So it's some kind of encrypted traffic. And it was just going on like that for hours last night and into early this morning. So nobody knows exactly what this means. We have different theories out there in the radio community. Okay, a lot of people think that these are some type of high priority NATO encrypted messages, which could mean that NATO is going on high alert. Now, one thing to think about with this message is that yesterday we had all this news coming out from Russian sources stating that Ukraine is planning a massive strike on Crimea, a strategic strike on Crimea, around the time of the Russian Victory Day, which is coming up in just 2 weeks or so. And they could use NATO weapons to actually, they will use NATO weapons to do this strike because there's no other way. They can't do it themselves. So they have to use either the ATACMS missiles, which the U.S. provided to Ukraine secretly last week. These are the 200-mile range surface-to-surface ballistic missiles used in the HIMARS launcher. They could also use the Storm Shadow missiles, which the UK recently said they were going to give Ukraine a whole bunch of. So maybe this is related to a possible Ukrainian strike on Crimea. Now, one thing to remember is so far all of the strikes on Crimea by Ukraine have been tactical or operational. They haven't really been strategic. But this upcoming strike on Crimea will be strategic, meaning they're going to go after the Kerch Bridge and maybe several high-value targets in Crimea at the same time. And the reason why Ukraine is going to probably do this is because Ukraine is in desperate need of a morale boost. Okay, over the last few months, Ukraine has been losing the war, and Russia has been slowly gaining ground. And so, what better way to boost the spirits of the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian soldiers than to have this massive strike on Crimea that would take out the Kerch Bridge and other strategic sites in Crimea? That would be a huge morale boost, combined with this massive aid package that Ukraine is going to get, that was just passed by the U.S. Senate, with 80 senators, 80 out of 100 senators voting to approve this aid package. That's 80% of the U.S. Senate approved this aid package to Ukraine. Okay, so Ukraine needs a morale boost, and they also need a way to slow down Russia's offensive this spring and summer. And because that equipment that's going to be going to Ukraine now is going to take a while to get there, I think Ukraine is looking for other ways to kind of slow down the Russian advance this summer. And one way to do that is to strike Crimea in a strategic way, which would force the Russians to focus on that. And it would also diminish the morale of the Russian troops, okay? And this update was sponsored by My Patriot Supply. Guys, My Patriot Supply is doing a discount on their 1 month emergency food supply. And to get the deal, you got to go to preparewithnyprepper.com, and the link is in the description below this video. This is a 1 month freeze-dried food supply. It has a 25-year shelf life. Normal price is $237. They've dropped it down to $177. So that's a savings of $60. And it's all packed within 2 rugged, water-resistant buckets. Free shipping is included. $177 for 1 month of food. Where are you going to find a deal like that? They also have a general store, and they're always running discounts in their general store on various prepping and survival items. They have everything from MREs, potassium iodide, to survival seeds. And to get to their general store, you got to click on the My Patriot Supply logo at the top of the page when you get to preparewithnyprepper.com. And you'll see when you get there, they have everything you can imagine. So use the link preparewithnyprepper.com to get $60 off the My Patriot Supply 1 month emergency food supply. That's $180 for 1 month of food, free shipping included. The link is in the description below this video. And also check out their general store. They have everything you can imagine prepping and survival related, and they're always running various discounts there. And we have some major breaking news coming from the UN. Russia yesterday vetoed a UN resolution sponsored by the US and Japan calling on all nations to prevent a nuclear arms race in outer space. The vote in the 15-member Security Council was 13 in favor, Russia opposed, and China abstained. Okay, so every member of the UN Security Council except Russia and China voted in favor of this resolution to stop an arms race in outer space. Okay, so this is very, very serious, guys. And remember, like a month or two ago, when we had that breaking news from one of the Republican senators in Ohio saying that there was a very serious national security threat in outer space, and the media was speculating that Russia could have put nukes in outer space. Then they changed their mind and said, oh, it's not a nuke in outer space, it's an EMP device. And then they said, oh, it's not an EMP device, it's an anti-satellite weapon, and it's non-nuclear, it's only conventional. They were trying to downplay it once they initially reported that it was a nuclear weapon in space. Guys, this is not about anti-satellite weapons. Russia has put nuclear weapons in space already, and they want to put more, okay? And the reason why is it gives them a huge advantage. When you can put warheads in space, it eliminates the possibility of early warning, okay? Normally, you have what are known as early warning radars, and these are long-range radars that can detect a giant ballistic missile going up into space, let's say launched from Russia, and that would give us like a good 30 minutes of warning, and that would give us time to launch back and send out emergency alert messages to the population for people to evacuate from calculated targets, okay, from probable targets. And based on the ballistic trajectory, we can calculate more or less where the warheads are going to land. But when you put the warheads up in space, there's no way to detect when those warheads are released until they start re-entering the atmosphere. NORAD would detect that when they re-enter the atmosphere. But at that point, you're talking 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, but most likely just 5 minutes to retaliate. And that is not enough time for any U.S. president, let alone Biden, to launch a counterattack before those warheads land and either take out the White House or take out some of our critical nuclear forces bases that could potentially interfere with a counterattack. And then they could follow up with a full-scale launch from Russia proper. So this is very, very serious, guys. Very serious. And Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said on Thursday that should the U.S. decide to deploy nuclear weapons in Poland, Moscow would consider them legitimate targets in the event of a direct confrontation with NATO. Such provocative statements by the Polish leadership are not news. The Polish authorities have not hidden their ambitions to cling more tightly to the U.S. nuclear weapons deployed in Europe and have been talking about it for a long time, she emphasized. As you understand, if the American weapons are deployed on the territory of Poland, the Russian list of legitimate targets to defeat in a situation of direct military confrontation with NATO will be immediately updated, she warned. And Ukraine already secretly received 100 ATACMS missiles from the U.S. last week and used 2 of them in a strike on Russian-occupied territory in Ukraine. And the reason behind the secret transfer of the ATACMS missiles by the Pentagon to Ukraine was allegedly because Moscow used North Korean missiles to destroy Ukrainian energy infrastructure in the last few months. And there were a bunch of air raid alerts in Ukraine last night, and there's currently a very high threat of a large Russian missile strike on Ukraine, which could happen any night now. And by the way, if anything kicks off in Crimea or anything else happens in that part of the world, I will go live 24/7 if I have to. And Russia captured another town in eastern Ukraine overnight last night. They captured Krasnoharivka, which is near Donetsk. So Russia is continuing their active defense. They're continuing to take little villages here and there while still holding their defensive line. And Putin is going to be traveling to China to talk about who knows what. And that could be ominous because anytime Putin travels to China, something big happens right afterwards. Remember when he invaded Ukraine, he went to China literally a few days before and talked about it with Xi Jinping. And before I continue with the breaking news, I want to ask you guys a favor. We have a subscriber of the channel, Ingrid. She has 2 daughters, and she's been having some financial difficulties the last few weeks. First, her computer failed because her daughter accidentally spilled a drink on her computer, and she uses that computer for her job, and she was out of work for a couple of weeks. And now her engine on her car failed, and she's had to use Uber to get around everywhere. And so she needs some help to fix her engine. So I'm going to leave a link to her GoFundMe in the comments down below. And we have some major breaking news coming in from Belarus. The Belarusian KGB is claiming that they shot down drones that came from Lithuania and were heading for the capital of Belarus, Minsk. Lithuania is obviously rejecting this, but this was reported early this morning by the Associated Press. And over the last few weeks, Belarus has moved a lot of military equipment and troops to the border of Lithuania. And I've been covering that and showing you guys all the troops that were moved to within just 5 miles of the Lithuanian border. And now Belarus is accusing Lithuania of sending drones towards the capital of Belarus. That is just absolutely insane. Obviously, Lithuania would not do that. So this could be a pretext for war and a justification for war against Lithuania. I'm telling you guys, Belarus is going to attack Lithuania, and it's going to happen this spring or this summer. The leader of Belarus went to Moscow 2 weeks ago and met with Putin. I think what they're going to do is they're going to time it so they attack Lithuania at the same time that Russia launches their offensive in Ukraine. And the European Parliament passed a resolution today rejecting the results of the Russian presidential election this year and called on EU member states to limit relations with Putin. During these so-called elections, there were no alternative candidates, no free media, no independent observers, and no political freedoms. Accordingly, the so-called elections are illegitimate and undemocratic. The European Parliament called on EU member states to provide humanitarian visas and other support to dissenting Russians. So this is huge, guys. Okay, the EU is saying that Putin is not a legitimate president, that the elections were phony, and they're calling on EU countries to provide humanitarian visas to Russians that are fleeing. Okay, so this is very, very serious, guys. And China has invited the leaders of Hamas to China to discuss the war in Gaza. And Sweden will be sending troops to Latvia next year as part of NATO reinforcement of the Baltics. Chinese leader Xi Jinping will visit Hungary from May 8th to May 10th as part of his trip to Europe. And he's also going to be visiting Serbia as well. China is warning that they will take countermeasures to the deployment of U.S. medium-range ballistic missile systems in the Philippines, known as the Typhoon. The U.S. deployment of medium-range missiles in the Asia-Pacific region will undermine peace and stability in the region, and China will take decisive countermeasures. And this was stated by the Chinese Ministry of Defense. The U.S. Army sent heavy equipment to the Norwegian Arctic port of Narvik for transfer to Finland in a manifestation of Nordic NATO unity. More than 200 vehicles and 300 containers were sent from the U.S. to Narvik and further to an allied exercise in Finland. Exercise Immediate Response 2024 includes allied training in Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Czechia, and Poland in the period between the 21st of April and the 31st of May. The Norwegian Armed Forces stated more than 24,000 troops are to participate, of them 10,000 from the U.S. Army. So massive drills in Northern Europe, okay? And there's also going to be drills in the Suwalki Gap with Polish and Lithuanian forces and U.S. Army forces. And that's going to start any day now. And it's going to be personally supervised by the Polish president and the Lithuanian president. So that is huge. And this comes right after Russia announced that they moved nuclear missiles, Iskander missiles, to the border of Finland. Okay. And Hezbollah told the Lebanon government that it is ready to expand its war against Israel. I reported a couple of days ago that the leaders of Hezbollah said that they're going to start striking deeper into Israel, as deep as 30 kilometers from the border. They've been only striking 10 kilometers into Israel. Now they're going to start striking 30 kilometers. And Bloomberg reported today that Israel is stepping up preparations for a potential all-out war with Hezbollah as the risk of a devastating new phase in the country's conflict with Iran and its proxy militias grows more acute. And Israeli airstrikes were reported in northeastern Lebanon today in the city of Baalbek. And the leader of the Houthis said today that Houthi operations led to a 300% increase in container shipping costs in Britain and significant delays in the delivery of goods. And an unusual large-scale security operation has been carried out by the Iraqi Ministry of Interior this morning in central Baghdad, the goal of which is currently unknown, but consisted of hundreds of Iraqi security forces and special forces. And we have the pro-Hamas riots spreading to more U.S. colleges today. There were riots in Emory University in Georgia. There were videos circulating on social media showing police clashing with these pro-Hamas supporters. And I want to just share this clip of Steve Quayle backing me up on the situation last week with the emergency action messages all night long, the Skymaster messages. So let's just listen to Steve Quayle here, and then I'm going to play Mike from around the world also backing me up as well.
So much going on that it's always sorting what's the most important. I want to talk about, at the first part of the show, the Iran, Israeli, U.S., and everybody else at war, especially Russia, and where we're at right now in the game. And I want to give kudos to Greg at NYPrepper. I want you, if you would, Eric, to put up that screen on emergency action messages and Skymaster and Sky King messages. I've seen some stupid ass postings of people saying, oh, this is just an exercise. So I went on and I reached out to somebody who knows this stuff and really knows it because he was in that world. And he said this, okay, so understand, Greg, NYPrepper has been doing a great job of not only tracking the tankers that refuel the U.S. and NATO aircraft for whatever war they're going to fight, but he's making the differentiation, and rightly so, between Skymaster messages and Sky King messages. Now, why this is critical. At no time in an exercise are the targeting coordinates and the arming coordinates given at the same time, actually arming signals or codes. So what we're telling everyone right now at the start of the show, whether you believe it's World War III time or not, it doesn't matter. I think when your mouth is filled with molten tongue and your eyeballs are liquefied in your sockets, you'll get it. I'm sorry, then it's too late. The Skymaster messages are used to reload new target data into the missiles and set them to the arm mode. Number two, Sky King messages are the launch instructions for silo missiles, submarine launched missiles, and the go code for bombers, which can be circling around in fail-safe points in the sky. A fail point in the sky is once they leave that, it's game on. The constant flow of messages, and again, NYPrepper's done a wonderful job of this, the constant flow of messages tells me, this is from somebody that knows this stuff, there is something being brought to launch status and holding. Now, here's boys and girls, and this is really...
So there you have it, guys. Steve Quayle backing me up, quoting an expert on emergency action messages, saying that something was brought up to launch status and was held there. And here we have Mike from around the world backing me up against all the people who were bashing me and saying that this was just an exercise.
They're going to take their hands off something. They're going to let something go. When they let it go, it's going to go kapoof. Everybody's not going to know what it is, right? But the Lord has put certain people in certain positions. They've held certain jobs. They have certain disciplines with an understanding of certain things. Like the other night, somebody wrote me a letter and said, hey, this, I'm not going to mention the email, but they said, hey, this guy called NYPrepper is saying that those are nuclear codes. I had to really write the person back and say, listen. If a person is not against you, let them go. They're doing everything they can do for the sake of the people. You guys may say, well, what if they're looking for compensation? Well, how do you think they're going to continue to warn the people? When the Lord gives you a task, believer or non-believer, when the Lord gives you a task, you burn with it internally. And when you burn with something like that, you're going to do everything you can to do what the Lord put in you. If we would stop looking for perfection from people and turn our eyes back to the Most High, we would have an understanding. We would know that when God assigns somebody something, they put out critical information. No one person knows every area. But we know how to hear things. Let those who do what they do what they do. Learn to utilize all these things around you.
So there you have it, guys. And I want to just show you some flight paths. Here we have some U.S. reconnaissance activity in the Eastern Mediterranean. So there you have it, guys. Steve Quayle and Mike from around the world backing me up on the culinary night. And here we have a U.S. Navy MQ-4C Triton flying in the Eastern Mediterranean, looping off the coast of Lebanon and Syria. These are reconnaissance planes. There was also a British Rivet Joint, which is a reconnaissance plane that flew in Jordan and Western Iraq. This was last night. Very unusual to see these planes flying over Western Iraq, and it was hugging the border of Syria. You can see right here this purple line flying along the border of Syria in Jordan and Iraq. And then here we have a massive amount of reconnaissance in Poland and the Baltics yet again. What was interesting about last night was that we had this Spanish A400, which is an aerial refueler, but it could have been modified for reconnaissance purposes, and it was flying for hours over Latvia. And we also had a Swedish reconnaissance plane patrolling the border of Poland and Russia and Belarus here. We also had a U.S. RC-135 Rivet Joint fly up to Finland and then back down again. And here's a closer look at that Spanish Airbus A400 looping dozens and dozens of times in Latvia. So that's the latest breaking news that I have. I will be back later on this evening with more breaking news. I will be monitoring the situation in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe, here in the homeland. If anything pops off around the world or here at home, I always go live, as was witnessed on the culinary night. So until later on, have a good afternoon. Take care. God bless. And don't forget the 3 Ps. Prepare, practice, and persevere. Culinary out.